And today we are recapping or revisiting or continuing our series called Think Different. Think Different. And Think Different is a series that we're talking about spiritual gifts that God has given us. Okay, spiritual gifts that God has given us. And these particular 5 gifts that we're talking about this morning, they'll come up behind us. And they are the gift of prophecy, and Matt spoke to us about that last week. The gift of evangelism, the gift of pastoral, the gift of teaching, the gift of apostolic. And so if you don't know what that means, it's okay, because each week we are focusing on one of those. And today we are focusing on the gift of evangelism. But before we get into talking about evangelism, I just want to recap what this series is about. And so a gift, if you don't know what a gift is something that is given to us by God, right? So a gift is given to us by God, and it's something that we do naturally and we do well. And so as you go throughout this series, I hope that you're thinking, what do I do naturally? What do I do well? Because God has given us 1 or 2 of these gifts that come to us naturally and come to us well. And you see, if we think about Jesus, this is where the hats come in, okay? Jesus actually has all of these gifts. And if these gifts were represented in hats, this is what Jesus's hat would look like. Okay? He has the gift of prophecy and the gift of evangelism and the gift of pastoral and the gift of apostolic and the gift of the other one that I forgot. I thought I was doing so well, wasn't I? And so Jesus has this multicolored hat. And so each of us, we have this hat with 1 or 2 colors. Maybe we have the gift of evangelism, and so we wear the blue hat. Right, but the idea is that we don't stay with a hat of 1 or 2 colors, right? The idea is that we learn from the people who have the gift, right? So we learn from the people who do it naturally, who do it well, so that one day we might all have a multicolored hat, right? And we will be more like Jesus. And this thought kept on waking me up one night, throughout the whole night, it kept on waking me up, and I was like, seriously, I just want to sleep. But I felt like maybe there was something that God wanted to say to us today. And it's this, that I think sometimes we look at people with the gift, and in particular, I wonder if it's about the gift of evangelism. We look at people with the gift and we get intimidated by them, right? We get intimidated by them, and rather than stepping towards the gift, we get intimidated. And what do you when you get intimidated? You step away, right? You step away. But I think what God is saying to us is that we shouldn't be intimidated but inspired, right? We shouldn't be intimidated, but we should be inspired by those around us. When we see people telling people about Jesus, when we see people openly talking about him and inviting people to church, that we should say, I want to be like them one day. I want to be more like them one day. And so I hope that as we go through this series, that we won't be a church that gets intimidated, but that we will be a church that gets inspired. Right? I don't know what kind of church you want to be a part of, but I want to be a part of a church that gets inspired. And so today we are talking about evangelism, and hopefully I will inspire you around this topic. And you will notice that everyone has some things around them, all right? But I want you to pick up this piece of paper. And I'm going to start by asking you to do a couple of things. All right, on one side, I want you to write 3 E's down the side, just the letter E. E, E, E. Does that make sense? Am I being clear? Yes, you can talk back to me. That will make me feel better. All right, E, E, E. Then I want you to turn the piece of paper over, and I want you to fold it in half. Okay? And at the top of that piece of paper, I want you to write down 3 people's names who don't know Jesus, who are a part of your life. Okay, 3 people's names who don't know Jesus, who are a part of your life. And if you're sitting here going, well, Rachel, I don't know Jesus, I want you to write down a question that you have about Jesus. What's something that you don't know about Jesus that you're curious about and think, I want to know more about that? Okay, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. So 3 names of people who don't know about Jesus, who are in your life, in your world, or if you don't yet know Jesus, a curious question you might have about him. And then in the bottom half, I want you to write down, similar to the E's, I want you to write 2 P's, a P and a P. So today, I just want to give you a heads up of where we're going. We are going to start with the 3 E's. We're going to start talking about what the 3 E's are. And you don't have to write it down just yet, but at some point write it down. But the first E is evangelism. The second E is everybody. And the third E is every day. Right? So we're going to talk about how evangelism is for everybody, every day. Okay? That's where we're going to start. And where we're going to finish is we are going to talk about how those 3 names that you have written down, right? How those 3 names, how you can be a part of getting them one step closer to Jesus, right? How you can be a part of them being one step closer to Jesus. And I'll give you a hint. They both start with P, but I won't tell you just yet. We'll wait. All right. So evangelism, the first E. So I'm going to read you the definition of evangelism. So evangelist or an evangelist is somebody who reaches the lost and recruits people, right? Someone who reaches the lost and recruits people, right? To expand on that, they meet new people, they talk openly about God, and they invite people to meet Him. Okay, and so as we're trying to understand evangelism, I hope you're asking that question inside your head. Is this something that I do naturally? Is this something that I do well? All right, so an evangelist is someone who reaches the lost and recruits people, someone who meets new people, talks openly about God, and invites people to meet Him. And so there's a couple of things I want to highlight around evangelism. And the first thing is that I want to remind us today that evangelism is more than conversion. Okay, if you're not familiar with that term conversion, that's essentially the moment when someone goes from being like one belief, one faith into a new one. And so in the context of Christianity, we are talking about when someone goes from not knowing Jesus and not having Him a part of their life and not being the central part of their life to actually saying, yes, I believe in Jesus, I believe what He did on the cross, and I want Him to be in charge of my life. Okay, so sometimes when we think about evangelism, we think simply about that moment of conversion. But evangelism is more than conversion. It's more than that moment. And I want us to more so think about evangelism as how do we help someone get one step closer to Jesus, right? It's not about a moment, but it's actually about a lifetime, right? It's not about a moment, it's about a lifetime. How can we as evangelists help someone get one step closer to Jesus? And the other thing that I want to highlight is that evangelism is more than service, right? Evangelism is more than service. And this is something that I have been convicted of this week. And my job is that I oversee the Hub. And the Hub is one of our evangelistic ministries. But I feel like that I have had a heart of service and not a heart necessarily of evangelism. Not always, not all the time, but I think this is for our church. Right, so if you're a part of our church, I hope that we can hear this today, that evangelism is more than service. Right, Jesus came to this world to serve. Right, Jesus came to this world to serve, but He also came to this world to save. Right, He also came to this world to save. So church, we need to serve. Right, we need to serve those people in our life. We need to serve our local community, but we also need to help them to be saved, to meet Jesus, to have their lives changed. Evangelism is more than service, right? All right, so that's our first E, evangelism. So evangelism, right, is reaching the lost and recruiting people, helping people to meet new people, talk openly about God, and invite people to meet Him. Evangelism is more than conversion. It's about helping someone get one step closer to Jesus. And evangelism is more than service. It's about helping people actually introduce themselves to Jesus. And so now I want to talk about how evangelism is for everybody, right? So just in case you were sitting here thinking, I can stop listening to Rachel, you can't. You all have to keep listening to me. Evangelism is for everybody. And I want to start with God. and about how God has a heart of evangelism. And so if we do open our Bibles, if you have a Bible, you can open it. If we open our Bibles and we go right to the beginning of the book of Genesis, I want to talk about how we see God and his heart for evangelism. And we find it in a story about a man named Abram. Okay, and this is what it says, Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. The Lord had said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who treat you with contempt. All, underlined, all the families on earth, underline again, on earth, will be blessed through you. And so right here at the beginning of the story, we see that God sent one man to save the world. God sent Abram from his place of comfort and home and safety and security. He was sent to save the world, right? God has a heart of evangelism. And talking about God sending someone to save the world, let's also talk about how Jesus has a heart of evangelism. Right? Jesus, I could give you countless stories, but I'm going to give you one story today about a man named Zacchaeus. And so if we open our Bibles up to Luke chapter 19, verses 5 to 9, we can see the story of Zacchaeus. It said, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down, because Zacchaeus is up a tree, right? If you don't know this story, Zacchaeus is up a tree. Quick, come down. I must be your guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner. Oh no, not one of those people. They grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth, right? This notorious sinner. This is what he says, I will give half my wealth to the poor. And the people that I have cheated, I will give them their taxes. I will give them back 4 times as much. And Jesus responded, he said, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abram. Church, if you can hear me today, right, I want to tell you that Jesus had a good friends who believed the same as him, who acted the same as him, who probably looked like him, who just sort of, did all the same things as him. He had that group of friends that were called the disciples, but Jesus didn't stay with them, right? He left his friends. He left his Christian friends. I don't know if they were Christians then because Jesus hadn't died, but he left his Christian friends and he went and sat and ate with Zacchaeus, the tax collector. And if you don't know, I don't think we like anyone we don't like the word tax. But back then, they definitely didn't like the word tax, and they definitely didn't like tax collectors. These were people who stole from people, who were seen as being greedy and self-centered. They were the notorious sinners. But Jesus sat down and he had a meal with them, and he changed his life. He changed his life, and Zacchaeus became a new person. Right? Evangelism is for everybody. It is for God, it is for Jesus, and it is for you, right? It is for us. And if we open our Bibles to Romans chapter 10, verses 14 to 15, we will hear about it. This is what it says. It says, but how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? Right? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? And how will anyone go and tell them without being sent? This is what the scripture says, how beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring good news. Can you see, right, how people get one step closer to Jesus? Right? They can't be saved if they first don't believe. And they can't believe if they don't first hear. And they can't hear if nobody is telling them, and they can't be told if no one has been sent. Right? God sent Abraham. Right? God sent Jesus. And today God is sending you. Right? You are being sent so that you can tell. Right? So that you can tell of the good news of Jesus. And you are telling of the good news of Jesus so that someone can hear it. And you are letting them hear it so that they can believe and so that they can be saved. This is what it is all about, church, right? You should be more excited. This is what it's about. This is the good news. Right? So evangelism, it is for everybody. And now let's talk about how it is for every day. Right? Evangelism is more than a minister. It is more than a ministry. And it is more than a mission. Right? Can I say that again? Evangelism is more than a minister. Right? We can't sit here and point to the paid pastors and say, that's your job. It's more than a minister. Right? It's more than a ministry. We can't sit and point to a youth group and say, well, youth group, that's our way we evangelize. Right? It's more than a mission. We can't point to the hub and say, well, we do that week in, week out. Right? Evangelism is more than that. It is for the everyday. Okay, and if there's one man who was great at this, it is a man named Paul. And Paul is actually the guy who wrote most of the New Testament Bible. And he was an expert at evangelism. And what he actually did is when he went to a new group of people, he didn't yet know Jesus, he actually stepped into their culture and into their everyday, right? And he found this thing called common ground, right? He found common ground with people. And so I'm going to read you a verse, but before this verse, what it says is that when Paul went and visited the Jews, right, so the Jewish people, he took up their practices and their ways. And then when he went to the Gentiles, so that were the non-Jews, when he went to the Gentiles, he took up their practices and their ways. And it does say that Paul didn't go in against what God commands or instructs him to do. But Paul found common ground, and this verse is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 22 to 23. And it says this, it says, yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and to share in its blessing. Right? Paul is doing everything he can. Right? He's not saying, well, here I am a Christian and I've got my set ways and my set things I can do and I'm not changing any of that. He's actually saying, I'm going to throw anything I can out the window, right? Anything besides sin, he's throwing that out the window and he's saying, I'm going to find common ground with people who don't yet know Jesus. And today I just want to share an example with you about a way as a family that we've been finding common ground. And so I don't know if you guys know, but recently there's been Halloween. I don't know if you've noticed. And as a family, we didn't celebrate Halloween. We saw a lot of darkness in Halloween. We saw, the costumes and the decorations. And we're like, there's a lot of darkness and darkness isn't of God. And we thought we don't want to celebrate that. But I started doing a little bit of research around Halloween and where it came from and what's behind it. And I don't know if you know, but Ween actually means Eve, and Halo means saints. So the Eve of saints. And the 31st of October was actually the day that Martin Luther King went and nailed the 95-point thesis of chasing away the darkness, right, on the church door. And so whilst we don't celebrate the darkness in Halloween, right, I can find common ground because I love what Martin Luther King wrote on those 95-point thesis, right? Right? I love that we can chase away darkness, that Jesus came to the world to be light. And so as a family, we say, well, we can't find common ground in the darkness, but we can find common ground in the light. And so we can dress up in a way that represents light, right? We can be out talking with people and collecting lollies. I sort of think maybe sugar is from Satan, but I also do love it, so maybe it's from God, I'm not sure. But my kids really like that part. But my heart is that I will be with people, right? That I will have the opportunity to be an evangelist every day, to find the common ground. All right, so evangelism is for everybody, every day. And now I'd like to just talk about how we can practically live that out. And so I hope for each of you that you had either those 3 names or that question on your piece of paper. But just quickly, if you struggled to come up with 3 names, then you need to find a way to meet people who don't know Jesus yet. All right, so I don't know, maybe you all wrote your 3 names down really quickly. But if you struggled to write down 3 names, the invitation today is to find common ground with someone who doesn't yet know Jesus. Right, but what I want to talk about is what we can do specifically around those 3 names. And those 2 P words are pray and prepare. Right, pray and prepare. Prepare. My alliteration is not helping me today. All right, so, right, I have 3 names that I have written down, right, this year. And I'm praying for those people. Right, I have a family in Appin that I'm praying for. I have my dentist who I'm praying for too. I had the opportunity to give her a Christian book. I also am praying for the chef out of Appin Pub because our hub kitchen ladies are everyday evangelists. And they just went out for lunch to Appin Pub and started looking at the kitchen and started telling the chef out there about the hub and what we do. And he's become interested and he actually sponsors our dessert and makes our dessert once a month for us. And so I've been praying for him as well. And so I guess I want us to be reminded of the power of prayer, right? The power of prayer. And this is an irk for me, right? That why do we just pray for our Christian friends and our family? Right? Have you thought about your prayer list? This is what I used to do. But I was like, why? If I believe in the power of prayer, why aren't I praying for people who don't yet know Jesus will actually come to know Jesus? Right? So when you go to life group this week, can somebody, particularly probably someone with the blue hat, right? Can someone say, can we please be praying, all of us, can we please be praying for someone who doesn't yet know Jesus to come know Jesus? Right? If you have life group this week, please, someone speak up. Say that we need to be praying for people who don't yet know Jesus. Right? Prayer is powerful. Prayer is powerful. And the second thing that I want to talk about is being prepared. Okay? And so if evangelism is all around being one step closer to Jesus or bringing someone one step closer to Jesus, for me, I think the hardest step is when someone says, yes, I want to believe in Jesus. Does that make sense? Yeah, like being prepared for that moment. I feel like I'm not very good at this. Like that's where I get stuck a little bit, right? How do you actually help someone take that step to like, yes, I believe in Jesus? And so look, this is an experiment. I've made a card for you guys. And I wonder like maybe if we just had this on us, like maybe if we had it in our wallet or in our phone. And it's basically a 2-step process, right? When I think about someone becoming saved, when someone becomes converted, I think, well, they need to understand the gospel, right? They need to understand the good news and that they need to then declare it, okay? And sometimes in Christian circles, we call this the salvation prayer. Has anyone heard that term, the salvation prayer? Yeah, okay. So what I sometimes find, though, is when you do this with non-Christian people, they're like, what is that? What's that? It gets this awkward moment. And so I don't know, this card is like a way that we can experiment with this a little bit. So on one side, it has the gospel, and it's called the 3 circles. And this isn't my idea, I've stole it. And so you can YouTube it, and you can see it being told in a really great way. But I'm going to give you guys a shot at doing it in my way. Is that all right? Yeah? Because I think this is super easy. I think we need to make this super easy, okay? So can you all draw circles? Yeah? Okay. Can everyone draw a love heart? Yeah. Can everyone draw a scribble? Yeah. Can everyone draw a cross? Okay. If you don't know how to do it, Leanne's a primary school teacher. She will run a workshop on drawing those things next week, okay? All right. So the first circle, right? We put a love heart in it, and this is all about God's design. And here what we want people to understand is God created the world in a perfect way, right? God designed this world perfectly, and this is probably the important part, is that we were close to him, that we were like in close relationship with him because we were perfect. He was perfect. The world was perfect. Okay, that's what that first circle represents. God designed the world and he designed it good. Okay, then we have the next circle, which is labeled brokenness. And that's where you can scribble. There's no excuses. Everyone can scribble. Even Lily can scribble. All right? And so God created the world in a perfect way, but then as humans, we chose to step out of that. Right? We chose to step away from God, and this is where we enter this space of brokenness. And so people will often say, well, if God's in control, why do bad things happen? Right? The reason is that God created it good, and then we stepped out. We chose to step away from him, and in that we stepped into brokenness. And I mean this as like a whole world. I'm not saying because you did one thing wrong, then now you're broken. It's not, it's around as a whole world that we stepped out of God's design. But then this is the crux about this part, right? Is that then we are separate from God. We are no longer close to him, but we are separate. But God was unhappy about this, right? Just like a good parent, right? When I feel distant from my children, I'm unhappy and I want to fix it. And so God came up with a plan and he said, I'm going to send my son Jesus. And this is where the third circle comes in, right? I'm going to send my son Jesus. And what Jesus is going to do is he's going to take on the brokenness. He's going to wear the brokenness for our sin and our failures so that then we can step back in, and that's where you draw another circle back to God's design. Right? And so if you believe these three things, if you believe that God created the world and he believed it and he created it in a perfect way, if you believe then that as humans we chose to step away and chose to step into brokenness, and then if you believe that God then sent his son Jesus down to the earth and then he fixed the problem, right? Jesus fixed the problem so that then we can be close to God again. If those are the things that you believe, then you can just simply read these words on the back of the card and you have been saved, right? That is it. It is so simple. I hope that as a church, right, that we can pray, that we can be prepared, that we can be evangelists. Every one of us can be evangelists every single day.